When SBC holds meetings in English and French on conventional equipment, the interpreters receive good sound and this helps them in their work. But today, the event will be going out in remote mode over Zoom. We would kindly ask you to remember a few tips to help us make the meeting go ahead as smoothly as possible. Set up a place to work from without any background noise as much as possible, preferably no other people around, roosters crowing or dogs barking. Use a headset with a built-in microphone for good sound quality and avoid speaking from a distance straight to your laptop microphone in a crowded room. You must select the English or French interpretation channel to be able to join in. To rename yourself, please right-click on your name in the participants window. Rename yourself per the meeting protocols advised as necessary. Keep your microphone muted and your video off at all times when you are not speaking. If you are entitled to and wish to speak, please click the raise hand icon in the reaction bar. Unmute your microphone when given the floor or wait for the meeting host to unmute you. Bandwidth permitting, switch your camera on while you speak. This will help the interpreters. You can also enter questions or comments in the chat window when invited to do so. In case of technical issues, please contact the meeting host via the chat function. If you're ready, let's get started.
À la CPS, lorsqu'une réunion se déroule en anglais et en français au moyen des équipements habituels, les interprètes profitent d'une bonne qualité de son, ce qui facilite leur tâche. Mais aujourd'hui, la réunion se tiendra en distanciel sur Zoom. Nous vous prions de bien vouloir suivre les quelques conseils suivants pour que la réunion se déroule aussi bien que possible. Participez à la réunion, si possible, dans un endroit sans bruit de fond, de préférence sans personne à vos côtés, coq qui chante ou chien qui aboie. Utilisez un casque avec microphone intégré pour une meilleure qualité de son. Évitez de parler dans une salle bondée à une certaine distance de votre ordinateur. Vous devez choisir un canal d'interprétation, soit anglais, soit français, pour pouvoir entendre. Pour vous renommer, veuillez faire un clic droit sur votre nom dans la fenêtre des participants. Renommez-vous en suivant le protocole établi pour cette réunion. Lorsque vous ne parlez pas, veuillez systématiquement couper votre micro et votre vidéo. Si vous en avez le droit et que vous voulez prendre la parole, veuillez activer l'icône « Levez la main » en bas de l'écran. Branchez votre micro ou attendez que l'hôte de la réunion le branche pour vous. Si votre bande passante le permet, allumez votre caméra lorsque vous parlez. Cela aidera les interprètes. Vous pouvez aussi taper vos questions ou remarques dans le chat lorsque vous y serez invité. En cas de problème technique, veuillez contacter l'équipe informatique dans le chat. Vous êtes prêts? Alors, allons-y!
Falafalava and warm Pacific greetings to all our participants joining us online today. Welcome to the third Pacific Ocean Decade Virtual Lab convened by the Pacific Community Center for Ocean Science. Today we embark on an exciting Vaka Moana on a healthy and a resilient Pacific Ocean. My name is Shauna. I'm from Samoa and I'm currently based here in Suva, Fiji. And it's an absolute pleasure to be a moderator for today's Vaka Moana program. In case you might have missed the English version of our housekeeping, just a few quick reminders again. All those who are not going to be speaking will be on mute, so you won't be able to unmute yourself. We'd very much like to keep today's session as informal and engaging as possible. So again, we welcome you to post your comments and questions in the chat as we go throughout today's program. There is live translation of this session in French. So at the bottom of your screen, you can see an interpretation icon where you can select either English or the French translation. Again, welcome. And if you're just joining us, warm Pacific greetings. Now, before we get right into it, I would like to officially kickstart today's program with a short word of prayer. Okay. I close our eyes. Our dear, most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we give thanks for this beautiful new day Thou hast blessed us with, and for the lives of all those joining us for today's program. We thank Thee for the opportunity to gather together virtually through technology, to listen and learn from those who will be sharing their wealth of knowledge with us today. We invite Thy Spirit to be with us all, Father, as we embark on this learning journey, that we may actively listen, engage with one another, and be inspired by the work of our speakers today, so that we, as custodians of our Blue Pacific, may take both individual and collective action moving forward to ensure the sustainability of our shared ocean resources for the benefit of future generations to come. Father, we also remember at this time the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Tonga who are still recovering from the recent volcanic eruptions, as well as those in war-torn countries. We pray for your healing mercies, peace, and comfort to be upon them and all those affected. We humbly pray for all of these things and for your blessings over each and every one of us here today. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Thank you for joining us and inviting the Spirit to be with us as we embark on this learning journey. And now I invite Dr. Graham Beeling, Head of the Oceanic Fisheries Program at SPC, to provide his opening remarks.
Welcome to Vaka Moana, a healthy and resilient Pacific Ocean. My name is Dr. Graham Pilling. I head up the Oceanic Fisheries Program here at SPC in Noumea in New Caledonia. This introduction is designed to give you a background on the fishery and what OFP does. The OFP is one of SPC's oldest programs. It's been working since the 1970s to provide information for its members, and more recently the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, or the WCPFC, on scientific and technical information on the tuna and the fishery. The tuna fishery is of massive importance to the region. It provides employment, livelihoods, and economic income for many of our members. That provides key resources such as roads, hospitals, and schools. So keeping the stock on which those fishery depends sustainable is very important to the region. The fishery is also of key importance globally. 60% of the world's tuna comes from this region. The catch itself has increased over time, and in recent years we've had more than 2.5 million metric tons of tuna of the four stocks, skipjack, big eye, yellowfin and albacore, caught in this region each year. The good thing is that our assessments suggest that all four stocks are currently exploited sustainably. So the key thing is to ensure that continues into the future. So how does SPC contribute to this endeavour? Well, we work in four general areas. We curate the region's fisheries data, so ensuring the confidentiality and continuity of the information that's really important for a regional and mobile resource such as tuna. SPC also works closely with its members to understand the ecosystem within which tuna live. That includes our regional tagging programs, our biological sampling, and our ecosystem surveys. This gives us an understanding of the health of the ecosystem in general, the biology of the tuna that are being exploited, and can also inform our studies of the potential impacts of climate change. This all feeds into the scientific analyses and stock assessments that we perform that underpin the scientific advice that we provide to our members, our sub-regional management groups, and also the Western Central Pacific Fishery Commission to help ensure the sustainability and the sustainable exploitation of the tuna stocks. And finally, we work with all our members to build their capacity to ensure that they can contribute to the information being developed and fully utilize it within their management discussions. That's enough for me. Thank you very much for joining us on this panel, and I'll hand over to our moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Pilling, for that brief and insightful introduction to the amazing work being done by the Oceanic Fisheries Program, or OFP, at SPC. As some of you may be aware, this event is part of the Global Ocean Decade Campaign by IOC, or the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. And every month, events are organized globally with the same theme by IOC. The Pacific Community, or SPC, have participated in 2 previous Pacific Ocean Decade Laboratories on inspiring and engaging ocean and a predicted ocean. This 3rd Pacific Ocean Decade Lab is on healthy and resilient oceans. Will mobilize scientists from SPC's Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Marine Ecosystems, or FAME, the FAME division, and end user of science products around a healthy ocean where marine ecosystems are mapped and protected. The main objective of today's virtual lab is to showcase the variety of activities that we in the Pacific, through SPC, its members and partners, are carrying out in support of increasing the understanding, protection, and sustainable management of our marine ecosystems and resources. As Dr. Pilling had mentioned, such as monitoring tuna stock and ecosystem health in partnership with its members through the WCPFC, or the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, Region's Tuna Tagging Program and Tuna Biological Sampling Program, to name a few. Providing regional stock assessments, scientific analysis, and advice to support evidence-based fisheries management, and member countries providing their fisheries data to SPC's data management team, which underpins a lot of SPC's technical work and advice. And finally, building the capacity of its membership in all these areas. So if you're in academia, from a crop agency, an early career oceans professional, a climate and oceans activist, or an aspiring fisheries scientist, you're in the right place. As soon, you will hear from 4 amazing scientists involved in cutting edge science that has made SPC one of the world's leading scientific organizations. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce our 4 speakers joining us from SPC's HQ in Nouméa, New Caledonia. First, we have Jed McDonald, who is a senior fisheries scientist with SPC. A key part of Jed's role is to answer the big question on tuna biology and ecology across the Pacific through studies integrating fishery data, genetics, fish otoliths or ear stones, and statistical modeling. The outcomes of these studies then feed into the regional tuna stock assessment models developed by SPC, which helps inform tuna management strategies across the region. Our second speaker is Valeriela, who is also another senior fisheries scientist. And she works on Pacific tropical tunas and their pelagic ecosystem, conducting work at sea, in the lab, and performing data analysis to better understand the functioning of the pelagic ecosystem. This information supports models that can simulate the impact of fisheries and climate on tuna and other large pelagic predators. Valerie, some of you may be aware, also set up the first Pacific Marine Specimen Bank and has been with SPC for more than 20 years and have seen a lot of improvement over those decades. Next, we have Sam McKechnie and Marina Ote'a Wichman, both fisheries scientists. whose roles at SPC relate to providing scientific advice to member countries on options to sustainably manage the pelagic fisheries in their EEZs and at regional level. So this involves several work strands, including responding to individual country requests, contributing to regional and sub-regional workshops and working groups, as well as assisting the Pacific Islands Foreign Fisheries Agency with science support and providing capacity building to member countries. And finally, we also have Tuilen Dua, who you can see busy there scribbling away. Tui spent most of his time in science class drawing lots of funny pictures, and this is what he will be doing for us today. He has been a professional cartoonist in the Pacific for over 10 years and has somehow ended up on this scientific panel. He will try and interpret what is discussed today with illustrations. And Tui is also based in Nomea, working as a graphic artist for publications at SPC. So as we heard from Dr. Pilling, a lot of the work that SPC is carrying out wouldn't be possible without the collaboration with other crop agencies to help protect and maintain a healthy and resilient Blue Pacific. And the importance of tuna in our Pacific economies is evident in all the infrastructure that has been funded and provided through all the income from that each country receive from tuna, as tuna in the Pacific, provides more than 50% of the global tuna supply. So we play a big part in the management of this very important shared resources across the Pacific. And before I hand over to our panelists to provide further information about the work that they do at OFP, I'd like to now let you watch a video on tuna management that which provides a high level view of what we'll be covering in today's session.
The Pacific Ocean is 48% of the world's ocean. In this ocean area, the Western and Central Pacific is a key region for tuna. Over half of the global total tuna catch is taken in the Western and Central Pacific Ocean. Key tuna species in the region are skipjack, big eye, yellowfin, and albacore. In 2019, the total catch of these 4 key tuna species in the convention area of the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, the region's fisheries management organization, was a record high at just under 3 million metric tons. The WCPO is currently the only ocean region with all 4 key tuna species in a healthy state, being neither overfished nor experiencing overfishing. Over 55% of the key tuna catch comes from within the waters of the Pacific Island countries and territories, and many of these countries rely on the continued sustainability of the tuna stocks to obtain important national income and employment opportunities for their people. Also, some countries have a strong and increasing reliance on tuna as a source of protein. The percentage of purse seiners flagged to Pacific Island states has increased steadily for 20 years and now represents almost 50% of purse seiners licensed to fish in the WCPFC convention area. For decades, the Pacific community has provided tuna science expertise in the Pacific region by providing regional stock assessments, scientific analysis, and advice to support evidence-based fisheries management, monitoring tuna stock and ecosystem health in partnership with its members through the WCPFC region's tuna tagging program, vessel and observer log sheets, and tuna biological sampling programs. Member countries provide their fisheries data to SPC's data management team to underpin SPC's technical work and advice, building the capacity of its membership in all these areas. For over 40 years, the Foreign Fisheries Agency has been supporting its Pacific Island members to take collective and national action for the management of their offshore fisheries resources. FFA works to ensure its members can enjoy the greatest possible social and economic benefits from the sustainable use of offshore fisheries resources. This has been delivered by innovative fisheries management and legal advice to help countries secure the rights to the fishery resources and manage the tuna stocks within their 200-mile exclusive economic zones, combating illegal, unregulated and unreported IUU fishing through cutting-edge technologies and regional surveillance operations, economic data and analysis to support countries to maximize economic returns and enhance social benefits, facilitating regional cooperation and solidarity to support Pacific Island countries to work together to protect and benefit from the sustainable use of their tuna resources. Through cooperation and solidarity, FFA member countries are working together to protect the region's tuna stocks and secure benefits for current and future generations. The WCPFC is the organization in charge of determination of the regional total allowable catches or total levels of fishing effort, adopting conservation and management measures, adopting standards for collection, verification, and timely exchange of data, compiling and disseminating accurate and complete statistical data. The members of the PNA control 50% of the global supply of skipjack tuna, the most commonly canned tuna. The focus of PNA efforts to sustainably manage tuna is the Vessel Day Scheme. PNA members agree on a limited number of fishing days for the year, based on scientific advice about the status of the tuna stocks. Fishing days are then allocated by member country EEZ and sold to the highest bidder. In this way, Pacific Islanders reap economic benefits from their sustainable management of tuna. This high-quality science, advice and support and the member country's commitment has resulted into effective evidence-based fisheries management decision-making. For the future, continued proactive management of the stock based on the best available scientific advice is needed to ensure the continued sustainability of the stocks and fisheries and the benefits derived from them.
Yeah, so as that video highlighted, our tuna stocks in the Pacific region are pretty healthy, and we'd love to know, the science behind, the science that's gone behind, coming up with these analysis through stock assessments and the work that the SPC team have been working on, starting with the tuna tagging program. I'd now like to hand over to Valerie and Jed, if you could perhaps shed a bit more light on how the tuna tagging program is being carried out at SPC.
Thanks very much, Shauna. Hello, everyone. I think I speak on behalf of my fellow panelists to say it's a privilege to be sitting on the panel here this morning, and I'm really excited for the upcoming discussions and your questions. So yeah, as Shauna mentioned, we're first going to talk a little bit about SPC's long-running tuna tagging program. And tuna tagging has been a core part of the SPC's oceanic fisheries program since the late 1970s. So the large-scale tagging experiments provide the key data that we need for the regional tuna stock assessments. And these data include things like fishery exploitation rates, the mixing of population, and the actual size of the population. In fact, to date, we have now tagged over 1 million tuna since the tagging program began. And to give you a little bit of a flavour about how these tagging cruises occur and what happens and the excitement that happens on board, we'd like to play a little video now to guide you through it.
Okay, so this video was taken in PNG in Papua New Guinea in collaboration with the National Fisheries Agency authorities over there. And it's a program that's run into 2012.
So here you can see a picture on the bow of the boat. There's a tagging cradle and the tags that we use to insert in the fish.
So the fishermen are watching for the fish. They use binoculars to try and identify the school fish. And here we see the fish master ringing the bell to indicate there's a fish school.
So you just saw before some little fish swimming around in a bucket. These are the bait that on the pole and line cruises that are used to attract the fish to the boat.
So the fishermen are getting ready at the bow, and here we've got the bait master who's throwing the baits to attract the tuna that were seen previously.
Okay, so action's about to get underway here. It gets pretty frenetic at times up on the bow, and you can see there's about 10 to 15 guys fishing here. The bait gets continually thrown into the water, and as the fish come up on board, they're escorted to the tagging cradle where the business starts.
So yeah, we've got the catchers who dehook the fish and bring them to the table. And here the fish is measured and tagged and thrown back into the water. And it takes really a few seconds to send the fish back into the water.
So yeah, just more action here from a different angle. You can see the fish coming on, like often really quickly. Depending on the size of the schools, there can be, all the rods can be buckled at the same time with fish coming on board. And it gets pretty hectic at times.
Those cruises are really organized purely for the tagging. So a real fishing boat would bring the fish back on board much faster than that. So we have two cradles here at the front, at the bow of the boat, and there are also two cradles at the back of the boat to tag as many fish as we can.
So as Val said, this is down at the stern, the back of the boat, and it's a smaller space down there. And often the action is not quite as fast and furious, but it's also a place that we can do a few more things in terms of different types of experiments on board, some biological sampling, and that just adds to the data that we can get from these cruises. So yeah, this is just to provide you a bit of context in terms of the area that's covered by the tagging cruises. As you can see on the map, the tagging experiments have been conducted widely across the Pacific. These are vessel tracks from all the different cruises that SPC has been involved with since the late 1970s. And their different colors there represent the different parts of the ocean where the boats have been traveling, and we've been doing tagging. The first large-scale conventional tagging experiment began in 1977, and this ran until 1981. And this was done under the Skipjack Survey Assessment Project. From 1989 to 1992, the regional tuna tagging project took place. And that time, these tagging cruises were more trying to provide snapshot assessments of the skipjack and yellowfin stocks, but provided more limited information on big eye tuna and South Pacific albacore. So then from 1999 through to 2003, SPC and CSIRO in Australia teamed up on an archival tagging project off the Coral Sea in Australia's northeast, and that was focused on big eye tuna. And then in 2006, the first phase of the current program, which is the Pacific Tuna Tagging Program, began. And this was in Papua New Guinea and the Solomons. And this ran through till 2013 in the first phase. Since 2016, up until now, this Pacific Tuna Tagging Program has continued with annual tagging cruises, each year done either in the Western Pacific or in the Central Pacific. Although recent COVID restrictions have changed those plans a little bit. I'll talk about that in a little while.
the tagging cruises are also give us also a big opportunity to do other stuff than just tagging. We do biological sampling, and we do also experiments. We've done recently experiments on how to best sample genetic samples. We are doing studies on tuna growth and tuna movements, and all those experiments are providing different types of information. And those information really depends on the type of tags we're using. So what you've seen on the video is basically what we call a conventional tag. So I'm going to try and show you, even if it's what you see on the picture. It's a really small piece of plastic that goes into the fish, and we have an applicator here. And I'm going to demonstrate right now what we do, how we do that on my colleague. So Sam, thank you for being my. And so we introduce the applicator under the skin of the fish. And when we remove the applicator, the tag stays into the fish and off he goes back in the sea. So if you find Sam somewhere, bring it back. But and so with those conventional tags, you can see on the map on the screen, we know where we release the tag, we know where the tag is recovered with thanks to the fishermen who bring them back, and we can have an idea of long distances where fish have been going. It helps us to understand the natural mortality of the fish, their growth, their longevity, their residency, and also the impact of fishing and the different interactions between the different types of fisheries. At the bottom of the picture, you see also another type of tag, which are archival tags. So these are much bigger. They are actually electronic devices that are surgically implanted into the fish. And it has a probe that's going to measure temperature, the depth, the light around the fish. And we can, with this information, estimate where the fish has been going, but very in very detailed. And we also, and this is the graphs you see on the bottom left, we can identify where the fish is going, mainly to go feeding. And so on this graph, the gray parts are the night, and the middle, the white band, is the day. And it shows the depth. So during the night, the fish are really close to the surface, around 50-meter depth. And those are big eye tracks. And we see that during the day, they move down to around 300 to 400-meter depth. So it gives us a lot of fine details on the tuna behavior. And this is also important information when we want to implement mitigation measures to try and avoid catching small fish, for example, or fish around fads. So this is the tagging is really a source of different information.
So we thought we'd just take one example of a recent cruise. Thanks, Pierre. So we thought we'd just take one example of a recent cruise just to show you some of the numbers and the type of area that's covered in these cruises. So this is the WP5 cruise, Western Pacific, the 5th Western Pacific cruise. It was conducted in 2019, and this boat in the picture here is the same one that you saw in the video before. So we're working closely with a local fishing company in the Solomon Islands on this cruise, and that's a key part of the success of these cruises, is actually working with industry and engaging them in the science that we do. So this cruise was a fairly typical one. It was done before COVID restrictions made going to the Solomons very difficult. But the cruise track, we left the Solomon Islands and we traversed waters in Papua New Guinea, Palau, and the Federated States of Micronesia. The cruise took 59 days, so we were at sea for a while, and there were several cruise changes, so people coming on and off, and Val and I were lucky enough to be on that cruise for some parts of it. The cruise basically focuses on skipjack and yellowfin using conventional tags, and this is to try and as Val spoke about, to try and understand certain aspects of their biology and also provide the key inputs for the stock assessments. On this cruise, we also trialled some archival tagging in skipjack for the first time. It was a pretty successful cruise, I think, given the challenges that they're often faced. We had tagged over 16,000 fish and covered over 6,500 nautical miles. So as I said, this was done before COVID, and cruises in the past 2 years have had a bit of a different focus by necessity. We've conducted 2 tagging experiments in the Central Pacific. These are focused on big-eye tuna, and predominantly big-eye tuna around fish aggregating devices, or FADs. So archival tags have been a key component of this to try and understand the behavior of the fish and how they associate with FADs, which are a very important tool for the fishing industry these days. The success of these cruises in the face of COVID-19, to me, really speaks to the value of engaging industry and our members in developing, planning, and then running these types of tagging cruises. We had record numbers of fish tagged on both these 2 recent cruises, so that was great work. So this year, all going well and travel restrictions lifting, we're hoping to run another cruise in the Solomon Islands. A couple of SPC scientists are going, and we're working in collaboration with the same fishing company that we've worked with in the past, and also an in-country fishery scientist who's going to join the cruise for some period. The cruise will run for about 6 weeks, and it's planned sort of end of July, August to leave Noro in the Solomon Islands. So yeah, this information from this cruise, this up and coming cruise, will be critical for the 2025 skipjack assessment, which is the next on the roster for that species.
Yeah, thanks, Jed, and warm Pacific greetings all. There was one important aspect that I thought might be useful to mention here, and you touched on it, and that's the importance of engagement with the industry. Now, we all know that the tagging cruises are critical when we look at understanding the behavior of the tuna, looking at gathering this important data and information that will feed into these stock assessments, and this is something that Sam will talk to later on in the presentation this morning. But when we look at the industry engagement, it's important to understand that we need to ensure that everyone is aware of why it is important, and understanding that there are different interests. Obviously, from an industry perspective, it's ensuring that they can maintain their catches so that they generate revenue, they can generate jobs, ensure that there is a steady supply of food into whatever markets they're targeting. And so there is common interest from both sides to ensure that there is a sustainable fishery for them to continue to catch fish. And to this end, SPC has been engaged in a number of initiatives. And as Jed mentioned, we've been collaborating with our member states and the tuna industry from 2006. And we've been looking at ways to strengthen the science, strengthen the way we engage with the industry in the Western Central Pacific Ocean. Now, the tag recovery is one of those success stories, and we've already heard that over 1 million tag fish have been released. It's a phenomenal amount. And really that pays tribute to the hard work of engagement, working with industry, but also working with our observers, working with our port inspectors, working with the vessel captains and industry themselves. So it's a great way, a great success story to see the types of work programs that SPC is working with our member states and also the industry. So I understand now we're going to actually see or watch a video of one of the tag recoveries in action. So over to you, Pierre.
The Pacific community over 15 years has tagged over 450,000 tuna, generating the largest tagging dataset for tuna management globally. While 18% of tags have been recovered, the SPC is seeking help from those involved in the commercial fishing industries to return the thousands of tags that are yet to make their way back to base.
We are facing a lot of challenge to have the tag returned to SPC. We have a very large area where we're working in, a very large fisheries, and it's extremely important for the tag to be reported and retrieved in port. So we've got tag recovery officers employed in ministry as well as industry that are meeting tag finders all around the region to provide reward, validate the data, and collect the information. So the tags actually are talking to us. They give us basic information such as migration of the fish, where the fish has been caught. Also give us a growth rate because people are measuring the fish, so we know the lengths when they were released and the lengths when they were recaptured. But also it gives us information about the fisheries impact, how much fish are actually taken by the fisheries.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so we've seen, we've heard from Jed and Val and Marina about the importance of this tagging data. And I guess you can see that the enormous amounts of effort that people go to, that everyone's done to accumulate this data. You can see on the screen there some of the rewards that are given for people that report on these tags, and the collaborations with the industry. But ultimately, our section of OFP, we end up using this data and we use it in the stock assessments, and we'll talk about it in a bit. But just briefly, they're very, very important data. In fact, you've heard the numbers. Some of our stock assessments we can't do without the tagging data. So it's vitally important, and all these different strands that have gone into the tagging program seem to be working well, I think. COVID, with the exception of the recent period, but hopefully we move forward now and continue this so that we can keep measuring the status of the stock with accuracy.
So we're going to look at another aspect that also concerns the tagging. So the tagging, as I mentioned before, is a good platform to also do other stuff than tagging, and biological sampling is part of it. So at SPC, since 2001, we have started collecting biological samples of fish. It started small, and then with the years, we established great collaborations with the observer programs from the Pacific, the National Fisheries Services around in the Pacific countries. And along the years, we trained observers, we trained port samplers, and with the years, the number of samples collected on fishing vessels, but also at port in canneries, really increased. And to date, we have managed to collect more than 160,000 sample of tuna mainly, but also other large pelagic fish such as marlins or mai. And you can see on this map the spatial extent of this sampling that started about 20 years ago. So it's really a collaborative work with our colleagues from the fisheries services in the Pacific Islands, and it's a great asset for SPC and for the region, and it's really supported by the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, who helps us to maintain this, what we call the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank. All the samples are gathered in freezers in Noumea, in New Caledonia, but also in other locations. And all those samples are used by us at SPC to conduct some analysis, but also by other scientists from the region or from outside the region, and to the interest of the regions. And so those samples are made available to all the scientists, and they can request to have access to the samples to conduct studies. And Jed will give you a little bit more information on what are the samples we're collecting.
So this is one of my favorite ever pictures. This is one of my favorite ever pictures of a tuna. Exactly how they look when they come in on the tagging cruise, a bit like this. But it's a nice representation of the types of samples that we collect. So depending on the species, the current data gaps that we have, and where the fish is destined to go market-wise, we can collect different types of samples that all feed into the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank as well, just discussed. So we normally routinely would collect the otoliths or the ear stones, which are in the head of the fish. They're actually located in the inner ear, and they're used to look at fish age and growth, as well as other applications. We also collect the liver, the stomach, the gonads to determine the sex, muscle samples, both for understanding like the tuna's position in the ecosystem, its trophic position, but also for genetic studies. And sometimes we also collect the blood and the first dorsal spine, which you can see, it's like the front fin on the back of the tuna here. So we can use this for understanding age and growth as a nice comparison with otoliths.
So I have just a question that's been posted in the chat before you moving on. So Chloe has asked if there's been any attempts to tag albacore, noticing that your presentation speaks to tagging skipjack, yellowfin, and big-eye tuna. And also just, I guess, a follow-up question in regards to the biological sampling, like what happens with these samples after they've been collected and stored at your marine specimen bank?
I'll answer the albacore question.
Yeah, go for it.
So there has been some albacore tagging. Albacore are my favorite tuna. They're called the chicken of the sea. And many people here don't love albacore as much as me. Some even say they're not a tuna, but I believe they're the best tuna. So efforts have been made to tag these animals, but because they're perhaps more intelligent than other tunas in the sea, they've been exceptionally hard to tag, and we have very limited information at the moment from the tagging studies that have been done. So it's always in our minds about getting some more tagging information on albacore, but just given the location of where the fish are distributed and the difficulty in accessing good quality fish for tagging, it's been a challenge. It's on the agenda though. It's still a point of discussion when we talk about tagging.
Yeah, I think we had a tagging program a few years ago, and with very limited success. I think in the numbers, we're closer to 2,000 fish tagged rather than the million of other tropical tunas. And yeah, as Jed mentioned, they're difficult to access. They are fragile animals, and they don't survive well manipulation. So it's a very challenging species to work with. And about the other question about how we're using the samples, we are doing different types of studies. So on this picture, you can see actually people butchering nicely some dolphin fish to collect those samples that will go into the specimen bank. And we have been doing different types of studies in collaboration, usually with other colleagues from other institutions. And for example, on the map, you can see here, this is the mercury concentration in skipjack tuna. And so this is one example of the use we have been doing of the samples collected in the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank. And we collaborated with the French Institute for Research for Sustainable Development on this job. And so the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank provided all the samples that are shown in blue here. And we collaborated with other institutions in the region to have a larger spatial coverage of the Pacific. What this map shows is that we have spatial variability of mercury concentration in the fish. So all the skipjack don't have the same mercury concentration in the Pacific. The lowest values are kind of located in the Western and Central Pacific. So it's pretty good news for our country members. And we can see that there are higher values in the Eastern Pacific, and the highest values are found in close to Asia. And so this is a great source of information for us. So it gives us a better understanding of what's happening in the ocean when we compare contrasted areas or where things happen differently. It helps us understanding how the things are actually working. And we know, and looking at the data from this map, we were able to understand that in the Eastern Pacific, there is an oxygen minimum zone. So there's poor oxygen into the ocean, and it really disrupts the normal functioning of the ecosystem over there, and it will increase the concentration of mercury into the ocean and then into the fish. So this is a good source of information for us. We also have, yep, sorry, Shona.
Yeah, no, it's just like fantastic to see the different applications that you know, all this data from your biological sampling and tuna tagging trips have on understanding different different sciences. And there was a question from registration about if there's been any studies done on microplastics in tuna, and what have been like, what were the findings, if any?
Yeah, so microplastic is definitely a topic that many people start looking very seriously, because it's a real threat to the environment and to our health. And we actually began looking at microplastic in fish. We have a program funded by French Pacific funds, and again in collaboration with other partners, other scientific institutes. We actually are starting next week experiment in the lab to look at stomach content of tuna and see if we can find microplastic in those stomach contents. We are also analyzing fish muscle, tuna fish muscle. We will compare New Caledonia and Papua New Guinea to see if we kind of detect some microplastics in muscles and in stomachs. So it's a work in progress. So unfortunately, we have no results to show yet. But this is the first experiment we are looking at to see where we are, and potentially extend the study if we feel that there's a need for it. So yeah, this is a great opportunity given by the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank, is when we have a scientific question, we already have samples, or we can collect more samples to answer those questions. So it's a great asset for the region. And there are other applications, and Jed has been working on some too.
Yeah, thanks, Val. So we also do a variety of projects involving fish otoliths. These are collected routinely, and we've got a large archive in the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank, mostly on tuna, but also on other coastal fish and other pelagic species. So this is a picture of a skipjack tuna otolith. As you can see, it's pretty small. It's about, well, let's say just over 3 millimeters at its longest. And these are calcium carbonate ear stones that sit in the inner ear of a bony fish. And like a tree, every day that the fish lives, a layer of bone is deposited on the outside of these structures. So you can count those rings, like tree rings, and this gives scientists an opportunity to work out the age of the fish, and also to see how fast the fish grows. So you can see here, these are just, you can see the rings here, like a cross section through a tree trunk. And the white dots here represent the daily increments. This is a skipjack tuna, and right in the core here, the core part, that's the day that the fish was born, or hatched, shall we say. So you can look at the distances between these rings, and you can work out how fast the fish grows and relate that to its actual body length. The other part of the work that we do, I mean, these are really important aspects, both fish age and growth. These are key parameters for the stock assessment models, and a lot of the work we do on tuna otoliths involves age and growth. Yet there are other applications that we can look at using these structures. One of them is the chemistry that is contained within these calcium carbonate structures. So when the fish swims through different environments, the otolith actually incorporates the different concentrations of elements from the water into the structure of the otolith. So we can measure those different elements. For example, one here I've put down is strontium, and strontium reflects things like the environmental gradients in temperature and salinity, but it can also reflect the metabolism of the fish and the physiology. So in effect, if we can measure the chemical environment through the otolith, it gives us a wonderful indicator to be able to understand where tuna move to, maybe how they're structured, how the populations are structured across the Pacific. And this also is key information for the stock assessments, because we still have a lot of uncertainties around where to divide the regions for these models. And otoliths are another string to our bow in terms of being able to answer some of those open questions.
Another part of the work we have been doing is monitoring the ecosystem, and we're gonna watch a small video to kind of show you what it implies, but it basically really relates to going at sea and actually finding, collecting samples to conduct measurements of what the ecosystem looks like. So yes, you should have this small video running. So we go at sea on board scientific vessels. Maybe in the future, SPC will have its own fishing vessel or scientific vessel, but for the moment, we are really collaborating with other research agencies. And this is the Alice. It's a French research vessel based here in Noumea, in New Caledonia. And we are going on board this small vessel with colleagues of the French Institute of Research for Sustainable Development to actually go and do some ecosystem survey. So going in the offshore seas, we have a number of instruments that we put in the water. We're going to measure the temperatures, the salinity down to 600-meter depth. We are also collecting water samples. So and it helps us understand what's in the water, particularly phytoplankton, but also all the nutrients. So here you can see we have filtering. We're filtering the water to measure the phytoplankton. We also have instruments such as acoustic that will allow us to see the fish below the vessel. And we are particularly interested in the small fish, which we call the micronecton. And once we detect them on the acoustic screen, we put the fishing gear in the water. So it's a large trawl net that goes only pelagic nets, so it does not go close to the bottom. And it seems big, but you'll see that the catch is pretty small. So the captain is always desperate because we catch so few fish, but for us scientists, it's always a source of interest, and yeah, it's always great to have the samples coming back on board. And those little fish, squids, little shrimps and gelatinous are basically the food of the tuna. So there's a large diversity of specimens, and they will that will constitute the food of the tuna, and that's why we are particularly interested into that. So we are conducting studies. Recently, we went from New Caledonia up to the Federated States of Micronesia, and we hope later this year to go from French Polynesia to Kiribati to collect this type of samples.
I love seeing more women on those science cruises. So we did have a question from one of the registrants who asked, what influence does mesopelagic species have on tuna fisheries?
It's obviously very important. So just for people who don't know, the mesopelagic fish are basically the fish that are located between 200-meter depth and 1,000-meter depth. So they are deep specimens. And I don't know if you remember the graph I showed before. We see for example, the big eye tuna are diving as deep as 300 or 400-meter depth. So they are basically able to go and reach those layers where those small mesopelagic fish are, and they basically constitute the food. And we see that in the lab when we open fish stomachs. We definitely see a variety of surface food, but also deep food in the stomachs. So it's the base of their diet. The mesopelagic fish and other organisms are the base of the diet of tuna, and we're trying to understand better and try to model how those small what we call forage fish are influencing the large pelagic specimens, and trying to kind of estimate or assess if they're going to follow the food or not. So there's a lot of work to do, and we have no definite answer, but yeah, still more work to be done on this, but definitely an important part of the ecosystem, of the pelagic ecosystem.
One of the things that has really sort of stood out from as you've been speaking towards all the programs and the that you're doing at SPC is the importance of collaboration with different partners. I'm sure if it weren't for that collaboration, a lot of the work wouldn't be possible. And I think I'll give Jed and Val a break and perhaps turn to Marino and Sam for a bit. So one of the common assumptions that people have is that tuna in the Pacific are currently being overfished. And this is where stock assessments performed by SPC may be able to shed some light on what the case is really. But before I hand over to Sam and Marino to tell us more about their stock assessment work, let's hear from Tiffany, another SPC fisheries scientist who responded to a similar question from Kyle in Marshall Islands on Teen Tuna Talk.
Teen Tuna Talk!
My name is Jason Kajamore. I'm from the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and one of my questions for you is, since tuna is being overfished, what are some ways other than farming to prevent tuna from being extinct? Thank you.
Although it's true that many of the tuna populations in the world are overfished, that's not the case for the Western and Central Pacific. In this region, all of the main tuna species are currently healthy and reasonably well managed. However, to ensure that the populations stay healthy, we need to collect information from the fisheries as well as from the tuna themselves. Better and more data will mean that scientists can understand better what's going on with the tuna populations and provide more accurate information to the people who are making decisions about managing tuna catches. Ensuring that tuna catches are sustainable is really the key to continuing to be able to harvest wild tuna.
Over to you, Sam and Marino.
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, I guess a bit of a change of topic, and it's always a bit awkward to start presenting after these guys have done their thing as they gallivant around the ocean, tagging fish, chopping them up, and that type of thing. So we're moving on to, I guess, a bit more of a dour topic, but maybe we'll spice it up a little bit. But yeah, so we're going to talk about stock assessments, which hopefully many of you have heard of. And I guess this is one of the kind of core roles of OFP. We've got a team of probably 10 or more people that are working on this full time. So I got a little slide up here, a little graphic, and basically a stock assessment at its most basic is how we measure the health of a tuna population or a tuna stock. And by health, I kind of mean answering pretty simple questions like how many fish are there out there? How has this changed over time? How much impact have we had? How much impact has the fishing had? And what might happen in the future under a number of different things, climate change and that type of thing. And so to answer these things, we use the so-called stock assessment, which is basically computer models and computer programming and things like that, which we won't go into. But basically, what they have is some inputs, and we've already heard from Val and Jed about some really essential things that go in. So the biology, we get the growth rates from these guys, how old a fish when they mature, knowledge of the structure of the stock, how they move around. And basically what we're trying to do is take all the information that we have available, the best kind of knowledge that we have, and develop these models that mimic what's happening in the actual ocean, so we know what's going on. And so we've heard about the biology, but one of the other really important things is data. It's a key ingredient, I guess you'd say. And we're actually pretty lucky in the Pacific compared to some other oceans where there's been a really long history of pretty good data collection and management. For many decades, there's been a lot of effort put into developing data standards and the minimum requirements for data that certain countries have to provide us. Yeah, and for certain countries, I guess we're receiving data from certain countries, and this would be along the lines of their domestic vessels. In New Caledonian vessels sending data to us. In other countries, there will be domestic vessels, and it'll also be foreign vessels fishing in their EEZs. So we assist members in the data collection and the management. They typically provide data for us to integrate into a kind of regional databases. So we're kind of working in partnership with them rather than being a repository. And we manage that partnership with all our member countries. And I guess an important thing to note over time, and which we'll discuss in a second, is in recent times or over the last couple of decades, there's been a huge shift in what's happening with this data. Back in the day, SPC was manually entering a lot of the data as we received it via post. And there's been a big shift now where we have, in each country, we have whole teams of really excellent data managers that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting now. And there's been a lot of work on the data management systems themselves. So I'll pass over to Marino to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I guess it's important to maybe point out another function of OFP is we actually serve, or we provide the services of data repository for member states. And this is really important. And you touched on some of the data standards that we collaborate with our member states. We're collaborating with other regional organizations to ensure that a lot of this data that we're receiving from our member states is accurate, it's timely, and can be really useful when we're inputting this into the stock assessment. Now, to date, SPC has developed a number of applications to assist its member state countries in ensuring that this data is collected, obviously in a timely manner, but also it's in a format that has been agreed to by certain standards that have been set up by the Western Central Tuna Commission. And so this really is important for ensuring that we have a clear idea about how our catches are trending over time, how our fishing effort is going, and it allows us to better, I guess, quantify these things. And obviously this is important when we look at trying to establish catch estimations to give a clearer picture of where the fishery is at any one time. Obviously, this data is important for also local fishing communities. It's important for the industry as it provides that important information when we look at fishing trends over time. When we look at anchor fads around our local communities, are we catching more fish? Are we catching less? Are they bigger? Are they smaller? These are the types of things that we continuously hear from communities, hear from our member states. The difficulty is, of course, when you're at the national level, is you hear these complaints, you hear these issues, but there isn't any data, I guess, sometimes to support your justification to get additional resourcing to assist or address any particular issues. As many states around the region, many governments use evidence-based information to determine how they make decisions, and so which is why it's important that we are collecting this data and information. And so a new approach that SPC has been doing over a number of years now is transitioning from the old analog paper-based systems. Sorry, Jed, if you, yeah, that's the one, thanks. Old analog paper-based systems and transferring this into electronic format. So it's a lot easier for our fishery officers, for vessel captains, for our observers to be in an environment where in the Pacific, we know that it's quite hard to have connectivity all the time. So these applications have been tailored to ensure that they're fit for purpose in the regions. And it's really nice. Again, a nice example of the collaboration SPC does with its member states. And we have a pretty neat image here. I believe this was taken back in 2009. And what you're seeing is observer logbooks, individual logbooks for individual trips on per-seine vessels. And 2009 was an important year because that's when the region decided that we were going to have 100% observer coverage on all per-seine fishing vessels in the region. So this just gives you an indication of the volume of data that SPC, its member state countries, are generating and having to deal with. And to this day, the observer logbooks are manually entered here. And also there are some countries that are having, who have dedicated data entry personnel for that. Now, it's important to also note with these new applications, it's really allowed national administrations to I guess, further advance a lot of their technical staff. We're moving away from data entry personnel to upskilling them to actually what is the data telling us, data analytics. And so, there is all these kind of underlying benefits to moving to this electronic format, which I have to say has been really successful. I mean, a lot of my fishery colleagues and administrations, they're at the day and age where they've grown up with this type of technology. And so, utilizing that type of knowledge base, utilizing the technology to enhance the types of work that our fishery administrations are undergoing, it's really cool space to be in. I did want to quickly touch on some examples at the national level. Now, prior to my time at SPC, I was with the Cook Islands Ministry of Marine Resources in the capacity of the data manager. And in the Cooks, our legislation, like many in the region, there was a mandatory requirement that all commercial operational log sheets would be transferred back to the administrations to be collected and also verified. Now, back in the day in 2017, the Cook Islands had vessels which were offloading at various different ports. We had vessels in Pago Pago, American Samoa, Suva, Fiji, and Papeete in Tahiti. And so obviously there was a logistical constraint on ensuring that we got those paper log sheets couriered back to the ministry so it could be verified and entered into the databases. Obviously, you can imagine there were some issues that we experienced, where the log sheets were incomplete. Sometimes the handwriting was just so terrible you couldn't actually understand what the captain had been kind of entering, and so there was a bit of back and forth, and this really did kind of hinder our ability to ensure that we were able to collect, verify, enter this data, but also analyze it, and to ensure that we were reporting to meet our annual deadlines. And so everyone will know in the region that you have national obligations, but you also have regional obligations. Your member states have signed up to certain conventions and agree that your annual catch estimates will be delivered by a certain time. So it's really important that you have this information readily available. It also has the potential to really either enhance or undermine some of the systems, fishing systems that different member states have adopted. For example, in the Cooks, we run a quota management-based system for longline fishery, and this extends to Abacoa and Pinkai. And so it really is important that we are ensuring that we have timely catch information to ensure that vessels or companies who have purchased quota aren't overshooting this, and which is why applications, e-applications have been quite critical in ensuring the integrity of those types of systems. One other thing I do want to mention was, I think it was back in 2017, SPC had just launched its artisanal e-application Tails, and this was focused on the artisanal fishery. And the Cook Islands was quite fortunate to be one of the guinea pigs, I guess. So there was a bit of trial and error with that. But we did see that there was a positive uptake. It allowed us to capture a lot of this information in really isolated communities. Islands or catch information we weren't receiving for years on end because it was just so hard and so difficult to transmit that data. Now we were receiving it in real time. And so that was just a great success story. We were able to implement a fuel subsidies program, which encourages the submission of data to the local authorities, and in exchange, fishermen were given rebates or certain subsidies on their fuel. So no, I just thought I would share some of the, I guess, good stories from the national level. And I think we're on management advice now, Sam.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of effort that goes into firstly the biological sampling and that type of data, but also from the countries and all manner of different data collection. And so once we've got that biology, once we've got the data, we build our assessment models. We then complete the assessment and it's presented to managers, and from that they can deliberate on how they want to react to the stock status. And so stock assessments are very complicated, and obviously we're not going to go into details today, but if you boil it down to the bare necessities, basically what you end up with is an overall kind of measure of the status of the stock, how healthy it is. And you can see on the slide, and anyone that's been in the region for any length of time will have seen this green, what we call the green finger, many times, this one on the right. And it's shown a lot because people of the region are justifiably proud of the current status of their stocks, which are pretty healthy overall compared to some other oceans. So basically, SPC does their stock assessment and comes up with some measures of how healthy the stock is. This is presented to the managers at a scientific committee meeting every year in August. And the job of that body is to assess the science, make some conclusions about the stock, and that's kind of where you end up with this green finger. And then they pass on their recommendations to the managers themselves. So this advice flows through to later in the year. There's another body. This is the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission meeting. This is the one where they make all the rules. So I guess the overall role of that body is to decide what the rules of the region, the tuna fisheries, are going to be for the next certain amount of time. And so if we were to present a stock assessment that said things are looking really bad for a certain species, that management is going to have to come up with some type of intervention to fix things, make things better. And so it's a really hard thing. And it's very hard. There's a lot of hard negotiations at these meetings about what we might do. So this next slide is showing something slightly different. So the last one, we're looking at the status of the stock, and it's got a kind of traffic light system of green, orange, and red. But just because we're in a fairly healthy state now in the Pacific doesn't mean we can necessarily keep increasing catches or perhaps even maintain our catches. So what this slide shows is a few of the species and a kind of a little barometer type thing that says, you know, whether we can increase, maintain, or reduce the catches of some of these stocks. So this is what the managers kind of have to, the kind of end game of what the managers have to decide is how we're going to deal with these species, what catches should be in the future. So you can see a couple of our important stocks there, yellowfin and skipjack, which are in healthy states. The general consensus is it would be nice to maintain or stabilize those catches. Whereas another one like albacore is, even though it's in a pretty healthy state at the moment, there's a desire from a lot of members to actually reduce these catches because it's not as economically advantageous to have them at a lower level. So these are some of the issues that they have to deal with. And so these types of things, these decisions to cut catches or even to put limits on are extremely difficult. And if anyone's been to any of the meetings or read any of the press releases, a lot of time is spent, I guess you could say, arguing or negotiating who's going to do what. So it's a difficult process, but I think it's fair to say there's been enormous strides over the years and there's been some big wins. And one of the most famous that we've seen in an earlier video is the limits on the purse seine fishery, which is very important. But just next slide, Jed. Just one example, a specific example of how this might be implemented was some years ago we estimated that Big Eye was not in a great shape. The stock was perhaps in an unhealthy state, and we might want to reduce some of the catches. And there was particularly high catches of juvenile Big Eye in the purse seine fishery around these fish aggregation devices or fads. So the small fish accumulate around them and get caught by the purse seiners. So one management response and an example of how you might reduce the catches of small Big Eye is to limit the use of fads over certain months of the year. So down the bottom there, you can see the number of sets. The number of sets that are fished each month. So you can see big bars during most of the months, and then you see a big drop off during a 3 or 4 month period when fad fishing is completely banned. So that's just one example, and there's many more in the region that we can discuss afterwards. So that's kind of an overview of the management advice. I think we'll now move on to a video, if I'm not wrong.
Kia ora, my name is Marino Oteo Witchman, and I'm from the Cook Islands, and welcome to SPC.
Kaselelia. My name is Nathan Bradley Phillip Jr. from Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia.
Hello everyone, my name is AJ Arudere and I'm from Vanuatu.
My name is Jayanti Singh. I'm from Fiji.
Kia ora, my name is James Kora. I'm from the Cook Islands.
I'm currently part of the Pacific Island Fisheries Professional Program based within the Statistics and Modelling Division at SPC. Part of my program looks at a pretty special topic in fisheries, purseine effort creep. Now, effort creep is a phenomenon that's just been realized recently that looks at kind of the advancements in technology, the crew experiences that have evolved over time, and as a result, they've effectively been able to catch a lot more fish.
I work alongside the scientists in the fisheries ecosystem and management and analysis section, looking at bycatch studies, looking at the bycatch data from fishing gears for the purseine and longline gear. Bycatch including wahoo, mahi-mahi, rainbow runner, billfish, and other non-tuna target species.
My engagement here is under the program with SPC is in two components. So the first one is to assist the member countries in development of management plans, especially coastal fisheries and aquaculture management plans and policies. The second component is basically to build my capacity and my knowledge and skills on the area of fisheries management and policies.
I guess the favorite part so far is, really working with the scientists and working behind the scenes to see how a lot of these models are run, the complexities behind it, and the hard work that really goes on. And I take credit to a lot of these scientists. They're world-renowned, the best of their field, and it's such a privilege to work alongside them.
Oh, definitely the food. I think there's a French flavor that's very present here in Nouméa. I love the croissants. I love the bagnards, the baguettes. It's not one size fits all. There's experts in different fields, and I'm able to engage with them on a daily basis. So just absorbing and soaking up as much as I can from these guys, and really it's upskilling my professional background. So
it's not only about the work, it's all about your social activity as well. So one thing I would say I like most is the one small thing. I like doing my one small thing. It's like every day I have to do my work, and that is balancing out work with your social life. So
I always look forward to the end of the work week, where we have Kava Fridays, and we sit down with each other and just talk about life stories and work. And this is also a learning experience for me to get a better understanding of the important work the SPC staffs are doing for the SPC members.
The most important one that I took out from this program is the leadership skills. So it's not only about learning to develop policies, management plans for fisheries development, but it's all about leadership in fisheries sector. So that is one thing that I would take home as a key message from this program.
My experience here at SPC has encouraged me to further my skills in the harvest strategy approach to fisheries management. So when I go back to my country, I'm going to encourage and create awareness of the harvest strategy approach to our people, and what benefits does harvest strategy approach bring to our fisheries management in long term, in understanding the performance of the fishery, and also maintaining our stock at sustainable levels.
To all my Pacific brothers and sisters, and to all the future Pacific Island fisheries professionals, I would strongly recommend this program to my brothers and sisters out there.
Stay focused on your dreams, put in the hard work and dedication, and always be humble.
SPC is very supportive of you, and so they'll take into account many of your backgrounds or challenges. And there's probably no better place to be positioned than Nouméa for 1 year. So, thank you.
Who wouldn't want to be based in Nouméa eating croissants every day, right? But I love that video, and very fitting for the next part of the program that we're leading into, and that's on capacity building and how SPC is giving back to its members through its various programs that I know Sam and Marino will talk more about Over to you, Sam and Marina.
Thanks, Shauna. So this is the last section we'll talk about, and I guess people that have been around the region for a while will know some of these analyses that get presented at some of these meetings and things are quite technical, and one of the important kind of roles that we have is to ensure that all our member countries fully comprehend what we're doing, the technical details, so that they're informed for the decisions they have to make on the management of the fisheries. So we'll just quickly present now a few different strands, very briefly on some of the things we're doing to try and enhance the capacity of some of our members.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And it's always a bit awkward when you're wearing the same shirt from filming maybe a year and a half ago. So thanks, Suki, for that. I did want to maybe just quickly highlight some of the different types of capacity building initiatives and programs that SPC undergoes. In particular, some of the stock assessment workshops, the tuna data workshops that OFP run. And as Sam's already mentioned, these are really focused to ensure that our nationals from our member states are in a position where they fully understand the complexities around a lot of these assessments, these technical papers, that they're in a position where they can disseminate it and obviously translate that back to their fishery managers. Another key objective to the workshops that OFP provides is we aim to ensure that our nationals are in a position where they can effectively participate in a lot of these negotiations. So there are a number of sub-regional committees that run annually, the Scientific Committee, the Technical Compliance Committee, and of course the Tuna Commission, which all require some sort of technical know-how, and SPC has been actively engaged with our member states to ensure that they're in a position where they can, as I said, effectively participate. Now, in this green table, you'll see the different types of capacity building initiatives that FAME has been involved with since 2016 to 2020. And, you know, it's great to see that we've had nearly over 4,500 participants, which have gone through various different types of placements. You'll see there's workplace attachments, and we saw the video previously where we had 1 year secondments in SPC, and it's a great opportunity for our people, our member state officers to, you know, really get involved with a certain topic that might be of national importance. They can sit down with, spend time with basically the experts, you know, and you're immersed in an environment where you can fully kind of engage in these topics, learn about it, and hopefully, you know, take it back home and obviously serve the region as you see fit. And so workplace attachments generally, they can range between a 1 week type of attachment to a 1 year type of attachment. They also have formal trainings, and SPC has collaborated with a number of academic institutions and also some other sub-regional bodies to develop certain teaching materials which allow participants to gain some form of accreditation. And one program that comes to mind is the Pacific Island Regional Fisheries Observer Program, where SPC has collaborated with the Foreign Fisheries Agency, FFA, and have provided a course which conforms to the standards which come under the Western Central Pacific Tuna Commission. And what this allows the participants is a pathway to effectively become offshore observers within the Western Central Pacific Ocean. We also have what we call non-accredited courses. Now, these are some of the ad hoc requests that we generally receive from member states. And again, this can extend to, could we have assistance in developing a fisheries management plan? Where can we deploy FADs? How would you conduct the beach de mer type survey? And so SPC will generally tailor a program in response to these types of requests. And of course, because of COVID,
we are moving towards, I guess, online type platforms, and we're utilizing Moodle, which is what we've been using for the stock assessment workshop.
Another kind of strand that's come up a lot recently, and many people will have heard of, is this kind of shift towards a different approach to managing our fisheries. And you may have heard of it, it's been mentioned in some of these videos, is this harvest strategy approach. So the traditional stock assessment methods, we do an assessment, management reacts. We might do another assessment in a couple of years, and the advice might be slightly different, and management has to react in another way. So this harvest strategy approach very generally is, before any of this happens, we come up with some predefined rules about what might happen given a certain stock status, and when it occurs, we know exactly what's going to happen as far as management interventions go. So this is a newish type of system. It's actually very complicated, the background maths and things. So it's important for members to understand this before they have to make some decisions around how this is going to be implemented. So one of the strands we've got going at the moment is to go into individual countries and hold workshops and make sure everyone's up to speed on this. And you can see a list of the countries up there. And these guys are also developing software apps that are used to support this, which has been a good way for people to kind of understand what's going on. Next slide.
Yeah, and just very quickly on this slide, we've already mentioned some of the collaboration that we've had with the likes of FFA, PNA, and really SPC will continue to provide, these training capacity workshops, courses to ensure that all of our members obviously in a position to effectively ensure that their national interests are upheld, and they can effectively participate in a lot of these meeting forums that they generally sit in from year to end. Voila, I think we're at the end of it, guys. The Pacific Island Fisheries Professional Program, well, you've seen the video. Great workplace-based attachment. Obviously, I was part of it maybe 2 years ago, and you can see here, this was probably the last cohort of island professionals that SPC managed to get in country in Namibia. And this was obviously prior to COVID hitting in 2020. And there was just, this image just to give a flavor, I guess, of the different types of participants under this program. So we got Marshall Islands, Samoa, Vanuatu, Fiji, and the Cooks and Federated States of Micronesia. So all I can say is I encourage a lot of our young professionals to please keep an eye out. Please do apply. It's a great initiative, a great learning opportunity. And on that note, Shauna, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Marino and Sam, for, it's great to learn about SPC's capacity building programs in fisheries. And I know this is very much needed in the Pacific. And having worked in a national fisheries agency before, and noting that we typically have very limited resources and pools of people to draw on. I hate to put you on the spot, Marino, but does SPC provide support to these agencies when their staff leave to join, like SPC, FFA, other regional organizations that you're aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. Actually, not too sure. I mean, obviously, if it is a need, a capacity gap from the national administration, they will obviously make a formal application to SPC, and I think from there, SPC will see what's within their capability to address those issues or capacity gaps.
Okay. And are there like opportunities for other early career professionals not necessarily coming through the national fisheries agencies? to perhaps also build their capacity in fisheries or data science with SPC. And I know, because I'm speaking for myself, after leaving fisheries and, developing my own sort of co-founding our own data company working in fisheries and agriculture, but I'm always looking for opportunities to like kind of expand my knowledge and experience within fisheries. And I know there are others in sort of like similar situation. So it would be interesting to see whether there are opportunities for those that are not necessarily from like national fisheries.
Yeah, I'll take this question. Because we have this little laboratory where we conduct a number of studies and experiments, it's a great platform for teaching and for learning. And so we're trying to have students. So we are not a university, so we cannot conduct graduation programs, but we can participate by having students coming over to conduct part of their studies and things like that. It has obviously been super challenging in the past 2 years. Basically, nobody could travel around. So, but it's definitely something that we would like to have more Pacific Islanders participating too. So maybe trying to have students from, for example, the USPs in the University of South Pacific in Fiji, or there are a number of universities in Papua New Guinea too, where we could have students coming over for some periods of time to learn things. So there's potentially opportunities. There is no formal program, but yeah, it's basically for people to contact us, and sometimes we also send internship announcement on SPC website, so people can answer to that. Yeah, Chet?
Yeah, I'd like to add as well that, yes, there are several things involved with the Pacific Marine Specimen Bank where we actually have active collaborations with different universities or other research agencies pretty much globally now. So there's just through having the access to samples that all researchers can access those samples through a request made to the commission. And so in a way that allows SPC to be engaged more broadly with students, particularly because many people who make those requests are doing their undergraduate studies or postgrad studies at different universities. So I think that's a nice aspect of the tissue bank as well.
It is, yeah, definitely. Well, thank you all so much, Marino, Sam, Valerie, and Jed, for enlightening us today with the amazing work that you're all doing at SPC in helping to ensure the sustainability and management of our tuna resources in the region. This brings us to our Q&A session. I'd just like to again remind everyone that this session will be, because it's recorded, will be made available by SPC and also be used by the UN Ocean Decade Lab later. If you have any questions, I've seen a couple of questions come through on the chat. Please feel free to post it in the chat, or if you'd like to ask it verbally, just grab my attention by using the raise your hand icon, and then I will give you the floor. But there was a question, if I could start with that came through. About stock assessments and whether these are carried out for individual member countries or is it grouped by regions? So this is someone that came in a bit later after the stock assessment bit.
Yeah, it's a good question, and unfortunately, when we do run a stock assessment, it's for the whole region, and so nearly all our assessments are for the Western and Central Pacific, and depending on the species, how far that extends, can be different for different species. And then one thing we often have to do, or we get requests from countries, is to kind of give them individual advice or interpret that as far as their individual EEZ is concerned, and we can do that to a degree. There's information in the stock assessment that we can apply to the EEZ. Kind of rough estimates of how their catches and things compare to the biomass in their regions, but these stock assessments are kind of most robust at the large regional scale. If you go into too confined kind of spatial area, they become less and less reliable. But then we also have, or these guys have a kind of parallel program, this program called CEPIDIM, which looks at very fine scale information about stock status. So that has been used in the past for certain species. If a certain country wants country-specific information. But yeah, it's certainly something that crops up a lot, and it's also something that in the future you could see becoming more and more reliable, or like a kind of work in progress, I guess, particularly surrounding climate change and shifts in the distribution of fish, and these things become really, really important.
Okay. Okay, so we have another question. Well, someone showed interest in the capacity building program and had commented, but I think this question is very similar to what I had asked about how does SBC select participants from its member countries to participate in the capacity building program, whether it specifically focuses on fisheries personnel or it's open to anyone interested in fisheries.
Yeah, thanks. So no, maybe I can take that one. I guess it depends on the type of workshop that's being offered. Generally, it's up to the national administrations to nominate their personnel or whoever they want to participate in a specific workshop. There are certain programs like the Pacific Professionals Program where it is a competitive type of tender, I guess, course where you need to apply, you are vetted and you go through an interview process, and it is the best candidate that is selected. So yeah, it does depend on the type of workshop that's generally being offered.
Yeah, definitely. So Chloe has mentioned that WCPFC stocks are all in the green compared to other tuna stocks in other parts of the world, I guess in other RFMOs. What would you say the harvest strategy progress is when compared to other global tuna stocks?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't think anyone on this panel is an expert in the harvest strategy work, but we might be able to fumble our way through it. But I know that there are other stocks around the world that have probably progressed further in this than we have. Certainly in some of the other oceans, the Indian Ocean, I think a couple of their species they're much further along than we are. So it's definitely a work on for the region, but I think there are reasons why it might be difficult in our region more than some others, just from the sheer number of parties or stakeholders involved with some of these stocks that are shared over 20 or more countries, whereas in some of the other oceans there's a lot of high seas, not an awful lot of EEZs. It's possibly easier. So I think we are behind some. But then perhaps more advanced in some as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see over the next few years. I mean, the next year or two, there's very ambitious goals about what will happen with the harvest strategies in the region. So whether they can be met will be interesting to see.
Okay. Moses in the chat has just asked if there are opportunities for member countries to build capacity to carry out their own assessments while working with SBC. And I think that's something that has already been covered by Marino and Sam about the capacity building programs that they have, where they assist the member countries in building the capacity of their people to be able to understand and help out with those assessments. But Sam and Marino, if you'd like to add some more, then.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, hi Moses as well. Yeah, we haven't, I wouldn't say we've done anything specific for individuals and countries for them to actually run their own assessments. I mean, we have worked with people individually and countries individually and had people here to kind of build their capacity, but yeah, I wouldn't say we're, and it's quite a difficult undertaking. I mean, it is complicated. I wouldn't say we've ever gone through the process of doing a full stock assessment like we would carry out for a country, but at the same time, we have helped with people that will use the stock assessment or something similar to come up with something for their individual EEZs, particularly like bioeconomic type stuff to determine kind of how many vessels they should have in their EEZ. But there's no reason why it couldn't happen. But I think there'd be a lot of work involved with that.
I think I'll take a couple more questions, just a couple more questions before we wrap up, just being mindful of the time. So one of the questions from the registrations was, what is the science behind setting target reference points? Would anyone like to give that a go?
Yeah, sure. I guess first of all, we probably should say what a target reference point is for these for the audience. But so a target reference point is basically a point or a level of the stock that you want the stock to be at to achieve all the objectives of your fishery. So it might be that you want a stock at a certain level so that you can make enough money to support your country. You have enough food for for sustenance for people that rely on it, and there might be kind of ecosystem benefits of having it at a certain level as well. So it's where you want to be, and so until you define all those objectives, you can't really define exactly where you want it to be. But we have in the past, and now there is a few stocks where this has been kind of defined for the region, and there'll be a certain, I guess, biomass level or a level of the stock where we want to be, and it's been determined based on these types of things. And some of them might be we want the stock to be a certain level because we meet all these objectives, and into the future we think fishing at this level won't have a huge amount of risk to ongoing sustainability. We should be able to keep harvesting in the way that we have. So it's kind of a rough example of what a target reference point might be and how you might set it.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, and so just quickly, one sentence each, for early career professionals and aspiring scientists that have joined us today or will be watching this recording later, what piece of advice would you give them that you wish someone had given you as you were just starting out your career? So in one sentence, I know it's hard, but we're running out of time. And start with Marino.
Yeah, always get the easy ones. I think the sky's the limit. You really don't know unless you're out there and you're doing it. And it's very much what I've kind of learned throughout my career, learning as you do. So yeah, I encourage everyone to continue to pursue your dreams and your aspirations, and all the best.
That might be the longest sentence I've ever heard in my life.
I know, right?
Learn from you, Sam.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that there are a huge number of opportunities. Yeah.
Really shorter sentence then. I would encourage people to just experience as much as they can, meeting people, exchanging ideas, and and experiences, and just opening your mind and see what's out there. That's important.
Yeah, and building on all of these sentences, I think one key thing I would recommend is just being creative, trying to think outside the square a little bit and be willing to take a few risks, move around a bit, put yourself outside your comfort zone. I think that can lead to some insights in work and life.
Thank you. Thank you for those nuggets of gold you've shared with all of us today. And if I may ask Pierre, before we forget that, Tui has been busy scribbling away what he thought about our session today. If you could put that up. All right. It's looking like a fish. That's a good one. Okay, we have a couple of time lapses from Tui. Masters of the Tuniverse. Yes, we've just heard from them today. I have a feeling this one is going to be an interesting one. Some of us definitely need some tagging. And our final clip. All right, data entry. Yes. Thank you, Tui, for adding some humor to today's session. Didn't take off. Steve says, love the cartoon, Tui. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and especially to our speakers. I do want to highlight just a few takeaways from this session. And that is that, tuna is important for the Pacific and accounts for more than 50% of our global tuna supply. And this is an important industry for many Pacific islands as it keeps people employed and generates revenue. And that, understanding the tuna science is critical for the proper management of our shared tuna resources. And that a key part of understanding the science is having access to good data. And which, scientists and fisheries managers can use this data to help understand how fish populations react to different, to fishing activity, as well as environmental stresses like climate change, pollution, and predation, and also helps in to better monitor, assess, and manage our stocks for long-term benefits. And without the strong regional cooperation we have in the Pacific to manage this tuna resource, SPC's work to understand the science and provide good advice to countries would be much more difficult to do. And then more importantly, SPC isn't just giving back good advice on tuna based on science, but is also helping to build the capacities of our fisheries professionals in the region, making sure they're equipped with the knowledge, right skills and tools they'll need to help their countries better manage this very important resource. And this capacity building is essential for the future of our tuna fishery, as individually, most Pacific Island countries are small and have very limited resources. I thank you all once again, especially to our speakers for sharing with us their wealth of knowledge and experiences about the work that they're doing at OFP, as well as, SPC in general, for the amazing work they're doing with the help of their members and partners in sustainably managing this very important resource for our Blue Pacific, which, as we like to just thank you again, everyone and our participants, for joining us online. This session will be made available, as well as all the cartoons that Tui had written up for us, and will be made available online. I also thank the organizers for this, putting together this wonderful program, and for having me to be your moderator for today. And that brings us to the end of our session. Faafetai Lava, and thank you very much.